It's one of the most technically challenging projects going on in the world to date. And as a matter of fact, we've set world record for the highest pressure tunnel that's been constructed with a tunnel boring machine.
The intake straw is ready to go now that the cap has been removed and brought to shore. A 3-mile tunnel that took 3 years to dig is flooded with more than 400 million gallons of water.
2 million people, 40 million tourists, 4 inches of rain a year, no rivers, no springs, no backup, and yet Las Vegas thrives. Neon lights, fountains, golf courses, pools, all of it running on a lake that's disappearing before our eyes. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the U.S., is dropping faster than anyone expected.
Getting more and more shallow at Lake Mead with water levels at historic lows.
Boats are stranded. Mud reveals what was long buried. So the question is, how long can a city built on borrowed water really survive? Engineers drilled the third straw to buy time. But what happens when even that fails?
Third water intake structure at Lake Mead is now complete and is ready to start being used this weekend.
Time is running out, and the desert is reclaiming the city that shouldn't exist. A city against the desert. If you were going to pick the worst possible place in America to build a major city, you'd be hard-pressed to find a worse candidate than the Las Vegas Valley. It sits in the Mojave Desert, yet one of the driest places on the continent. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit.
Fall's temperature swing is just as pronounced in the Las Vegas Valley, where our mean normal high temperature in July is a scorching 104.5.
The annual rainfall is a joke, about 4 inches in an average year. There are no significant rivers, no large natural lakes, no reliable aquifer that could support anything close to a modern metropolis. The landscape is rocks, sand, creosote bush, and heat that warps the horizon. And yet, here we are, 2 million permanent residents, 40 million tourists every year, a skyline that glows so brightly you can see it from space. The story of how Las Vegas got its water starts in the 1930s with the construction of Hoover Dam, when the government decided to tame the Colorado River.
The mighty waters of the Colorado were running unused to the sea. Today, we translate them into a great national possession.
To control its floods and harness its power, they built one of the largest concrete structures on Earth, and in doing so, created Lake Mead. And the reservoir filled over years, eventually holding up to 9 trillion gallons of water. It was, for decades, the largest man-made reservoir in the Western Hemisphere.
At the peak of construction, the dam offers work to over 5,000, including a handful of Apaches, who are among the few American Indians to get work.
Las Vegas started drawing water from Lake Mead in 1971, when the valley had about 126,000 residents. That's it. A small desert town with a handful of casinos and a lot of open sand. But something was about to change. In the decades that followed, Las Vegas exploded. The population surged. The Strip transformed into a global destination. Mega resorts sprouted from the desert floor, and every single one of them needed water. By the 2000s, Las Vegas had grown to nearly 2 million people. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. The amount of Colorado River water that Nevada is legally entitled to, its official allocation under federal law, is just 300,000 acre-feet per year. That's the smallest share of any state on the river. California gets 4.4 million. Arizona gets 2.8 million. Nevada, 300,000. That's it. For an entire state whose largest city is one of the most famous on Earth. So from the very beginning, Las Vegas was living on borrowed margins. A city with millions of people, billions of dollars in economic activity, and an allocation of water that was decided in the 1920s, when almost nobody lived there. And the river that feeds the lake that feeds the city? It was already promised to more people than it could ever serve. A broken promise. To understand why Lake Mead is dying, you have to go back to 1922, to a room in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where a group of men in suits sat down and divided a river they didn't fully understand. The Colorado River Compact. It sounds bureaucratic, boring even.
102 years ago, 7 Southwest states dependent on an unpredictable river got together and agreed to the Colorado River Compact.
That agreement should have left plenty of water in the river for everyone who needed it.
But this single document is arguably the most consequential water agreement in American history. And it was built on a lie. Here's what happened. 7 states, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California, all had claims on the Colorado River. The river originates as snowmelt high in the Rocky Mountains and flows 1,400 miles southwest through canyons, deserts, and valleys before reaching Mexico and the Gulf of California. Every state along the way wanted its share. California was growing fast and already diverting water aggressively. The upstream states were terrified that under the legal doctrine of prior appropriation, first come, or first served, California would claim so much water that nothing would be left. So they negotiated. Under the direction of Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover, the 7 states agreed to split the river in half. The upper basin states would get 7.5 million acre-feet per year. The lower basin states would get 7.5 million.
The lower basin states have consistently pulled more than their allotted 7.5 million acre-feet out of the river.
Later, Mexico was guaranteed an additional 1.5 million. Total allocations, 16.5 million acre-feet per year. There was just one problem. The river doesn't have that much water. The 1920s happened to be an abnormally wet period. River flows were at historical highs, topping 20 million acre-feet in some years. The negotiators looked at those numbers and assumed they were normal. They weren't. Tree ring studies going back centuries show that the long-term average flow of the Colorado is closer to 15 million acre-feet. And in dry periods, which are common and which can last decades, flows drop to 13 or even 12 million. So from the very first day the ink dried on the Colorado River Compact, more water was promised than the river could deliver. It was over-allocated by design, built on optimism instead of science, and nobody corrected the math. And here's the kicker. Native American tribes, who had lived along the river for millennia and whose water rights had been recognized by the Supreme Court as far back as 1908, were not even invited to the negotiating table. 29 tribes in the Colorado River Basin were simply left out of the conversation. Their needs, their rights, their existence, an afterthought in a document that carved up the most important river in the American West. For decades, it didn't matter. And the massive reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, acted as savings accounts. Wet years filled them up. Dry years drew them down. The system worked until it didn't. Starting around the year 2000, the Southwest entered what scientists now call a mega drought.
Scientists are calling it a mega drought brought on by climate change. Now look at this map. The latest U.S. Drought Monitor map shows large areas of the Southwest are exceptionally dry.
The worst dry period in at least 1,200 years. Snowpack declined. Temperatures rose. The Colorado River began delivering significantly less water than the system demanded. And Lake Mead, that massive insurance policy, started to shrink. Year after year, the waterline dropped. 10 feet, 20, 50, 100. The white bathtub ring grew taller. Boat ramps that once led to water now ended in cracked mud. Marinas closed. Old structures emerged from the receding water like ghosts. And in Las Vegas, where the 2 intake pipes that drew water from the lake, the city's literal lifelines, began to get dangerously close to the surface. Intake number 1 sits at 1,050 feet of elevation. When Lake Mead dropped below that, it went offline, dead, useless. Intake number 2 operates down to about 1,000 feet. But with the lake plummeting toward that threshold, officials knew that losing both intakes would mean losing the ability to deliver water to 2 million people. Las Vegas needed a solution, and they needed it fast. The third straw, engineering the impossible. In 2005, the Southern Nevada Water Authority made a decision that would define the next chapter of this city's survival. They greenlit a project so ambitious, so technically challenging, and so expensive that engineers compared it to the construction of Hoover Dam itself. And they called it Intake Number 3. The public called it the third straw. The concept was straightforward. Drill a new intake tunnel that could draw water from Lake Mead at a much lower elevation than the existing two. If the lake kept falling, and every projection said it would, this tunnel would be the only thing keeping Las Vegas connected to its water supply. The execution was anything but straightforward. Construction began in 2008. The plan required boring a 3-mile tunnel through fractured bedrock, much of it directly beneath the lake bed itself. To do it, engineers lowered a custom-built tunnel boring machine, a 1,700-ton monster almost as long as 2 football fields, in pieces down a 600-foot vertical shaft near the shore of Lake Mead. Workers reassembled the machine underground in conditions that were hot, humid, and constantly fighting water seepage from the lake above. Let that image sit with you. 600 feet below the surface of one of the largest reservoirs on the planet, crews of 14 workers traded shifts, guiding a machine with 44 disc cutters and 23 knives through wet, unstable rock, inching forward a few feet at a time. Water was trickling down the walls. The pressure of millions of acre-feet of lake water pressed against everything around them. One mistake, one miscalculation, one crack in the wrong place, and the lake could come flooding in. And it wasn't just theoretical danger. In June 2012, a 44-year-old construction worker named Thomas Albert Turner was killed on the job when a pressurized jet of grouting material was ejected during a tunnel lining mishap. He was struck in the head. He died in a tunnel built to keep a city alive. And the project battled cost overruns and construction delays. The original estimate ballooned. Workers spent years in conditions that were part submarine, part mine shaft. The air thick with humidity, the rock unpredictable, the pressure of an entire lake pushing down from above. Every day they went to work knowing that the margin between routine and catastrophe was measured in inches of rock. But by December 2014, when the boring machine reached its target, connecting with a massive concrete and steel intake structure sunk to the bottom of the lake, the machine was only millimeters off its intended mark. 3 miles of tunnel, 600 feet underground, beneath a reservoir, and they hit their target with surgical precision. In September 2015, the plug was pulled. An 8.6-ton steel ball was hoisted by crane from a barge on the lake, uncapping the intake and flooding the tunnel. The third straw was online. The total cost, somewhere between $817 million and $1.5 billion.
The cost of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, it's going to cost them nearly $820 million.
Depending on which phase of the project you include. The new intake taps Lake Mead at 860 feet above sea level. That's 190 feet below the old first intake. It means that even as the lake continues to fall, Las Vegas can keep drawing water. The third straw is now the only operating intake pipe for all of southern Nevada. Think about that. A city of 2 million people, 40 million annual tourists, and one of the largest entertainment economies on Earth, all drinking from a single straw at the bottom of a shrinking lake. The engineers did something extraordinary, but they didn't solve the problem. They just drilled deeper into it. The illusion of safety. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable, because everything about the third straw sounds like a victory. The engineering was world-class. The foresight was commendable. Las Vegas saw the crisis coming and built its way out. Except the lake didn't stop falling. In July 2022, Lake Mead dropped to 1,040 feet, the lowest level since the reservoir was first filled in the 1930s. The bathtub ring was nearly 200 feet tall. The reservoir held only about 30% of its capacity. Old boats, human remains, a World War II-era landing craft, all surfacing from a lake that was supposed to be full. A lucky break came in 2023. The Southern Rockies had an exceptional snow year, and the runoff helped push levels up about 30 feet. People exhaled. Headlines proclaimed the crisis was easing. But one good snow year doesn't reverse a 25-year mega drought. And the numbers coming in right now, in 2026, are terrifying. Snowpack across the upper Colorado River Basin is sitting at roughly 69% of normal. Last year, even when snowpack peaked at 91%, the actual stream flow into Lake Powell, the reservoir upstream that feeds Lake Mead, only reached about 55% of normal. That's the brutal math of this drought. Even decent snow years produce mediocre water because the parched soil soaks up so much before it ever reaches the river. Federal forecasters are now projecting that Lake Mead could hit a record low near 1,032 feet by the end of 2027, nearly 8 feet below the previous record. The reservoir is currently about 34% full. The Bureau of Reclamation has called the hydrologic outlook poor and has stressed the need for immediate action. Now, let's talk about dead pool, because this is the concept that should terrify everyone. Dead pool at Lake Mead is 895 feet. At that elevation, water can no longer flow through Hoover Dam's outlet works by gravity. The turbines stop spinning, no hydroelectric power, no water releases downstream. The lake essentially becomes a puddle trapped behind a wall, usable to nobody. The third straw taps the lake at 860 feet, below dead pool, which means technically Las Vegas could still physically pump water even after every other downstream user is cut off. That's the insurance policy. But think about what that world looks like. A Lake Mead at dead pool means no water flowing to farms in Arizona and California that grow a significant portion of the nation's winter vegetables. No hydroelectric power for millions of homes. Tribes along the river cut off from water that was promised to them. Mexico's share gone. The entire lower Colorado River system collapsed. And Las Vegas, still sucking water from the bottom of a nearly empty lake, surrounded by catastrophe on every side. How long can that last? How long before the straw is sitting in mud? Imagine turning on your kitchen faucet one morning and hearing air. Imagine telling your kids that the pool is closed, not for the season, but forever. Imagine 40 million tourists deciding that Las Vegas isn't worth visiting anymore because the city feels like it's dying. That's not science fiction. That's the logical endpoint of a curve that has been trending in one direction for a quarter century. The third straw didn't solve the crisis, it just moved the finish line. The lake is still headed in the same direction. Down. Buying time, not survival. Now, in fairness, Las Vegas has done something remarkable that doesn't get enough attention. While the rest of the American West has struggled to adapt, this city, this over-the-top, excessive, neon-drenched desert oasis, has become one of the most aggressive water conservers in the nation. Since 2002, southern Nevada has reduced its per capita water use by 58%. Think about that number, more than half. And they did it while adding nearly 900,000 new residents. The population doubled, and total water consumption went down. No major American city has pulled off anything close to that. How? By going to war against every unnecessary drop. They banned grass in front yards for new homes starting in 2003. By 2022, they banned grass and spray irrigation at all new properties. And they passed the first law in the nation banning non-functional turf, the decorative grass on medians in front of businesses along parking lots. That grass was consuming 73 gallons per square foot every year in the desert heat. They've ripped out more than 200 million square feet of it so far. By 2027, all remaining non-functional grass must be gone. The Water Authority estimates the grass ban alone will save nearly 10% of the region's total water supply. Golf courses, that ultimate symbol of desert excess, are now under strict water budgets. New courses are banned. Existing courses have reduced irrigated acreage, some painting dormant turf green to save water. Penalties for exceeding water budgets are severe, up to 9 times the top-tier rate. New swimming pools are capped at 600 square feet. New evaporative cooling in new commercial buildings is banned. There are 14 water waste investigators patrolling the valley, handing out fines that start at $80 and climb to nearly $1,300 for repeat offenders. There's a mandatory watering schedule that changes by season. But the real genius of the Las Vegas water system is the recycling. Nearly all water used indoors, every shower, every flushed toilet, every dishwasher cycle in every hotel room on the Strip is collected, treated to clean water standards, and pumped back into Lake Mead through the Las Vegas Wash. The Water Authority earns return flow credits for every gallon returned, which allows them to draw additional water without it counting against their allocation. Or the system is so effective that officials have said you could leave every faucet running in every hotel room in Las Vegas and it wouldn't consume any additional water, because it all comes back. The Las Vegas Strip, for all its perceived excess, uses only about 5% of the region's water. 5%. To support the largest employment base in the state and 40 million annual visitors. The fountains at the Bellagio, private well water, filtered and recirculated in a closed loop. It's genuinely impressive. Las Vegas has proven that conservation works, that cities can grow while using less. That desert living doesn't have to mean desert waste. The city that the world mocks for excess has, quietly, become a model for the rest of the country. Other Western cities are now studying the Las Vegas playbook and trying to replicate its turf removal programs, its recycling infrastructure, its cultural shift toward treating every gallon like it matters. But here's the cold, hard truth that sits beneath all of it. Conservation can reduce demand. It cannot create supply. You can rip out every blade of grass, cap every pool, recycle every drop that hits a drain, and the Colorado River is still going to deliver less water than 7 states, 40 million people, and the nation's most productive agricultural regions need. Climate change is raising temperatures across the basin. Scientists estimate there's about 20% less water in the system now than there was before the drought began. Snowpack is declining. Soil is drier. Evaporation rates are climbing. The agreements governing the Colorado River, the operating guidelines, and the drought contingency plans, the shortage frameworks, expire at the end of 2026. 7 states are supposed to negotiate a new deal. As of right now, there is no deal. The upper basin states of Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico have refused mandatory reductions. California clings to legal allocations that were promised a century ago. Nevada, in desperation, has pitched its own last-ditch stopgap plan. The federal government has warned that if the states can't agree, Washington will decide for them. And in the background, the projections keep getting worse. Lake Mead, heading toward record lows. Lake Powell, potentially dropping below minimum power pool. The entire Colorado River system inching closer to a point from which recovery may take decades, if it's possible at all. Las Vegas has bought itself time, years maybe, on a decade or two possibly. But time is not water, and the clock is ticking. The Strip glitters as if nothing has changed. Tourists sip cocktails by the pool. Families laugh at night shows. Neon lights blaze against the desert sky. From above, Las Vegas looks immortal, untouchable. But down below, in the depths of Lake Mead, the third straw sits in silence, waiting. Every inch of water it reaches brings life to millions above, but every day the lake drops a little further. The Colorado River keeps no promises. The snowpack thins, reservoirs shrink, and agreements made decades ago are expiring, leaving cities across the West vulnerable to a future they've never fully prepared for. Las Vegas may be doing everything it can: conservation, recycling, innovation. Yet even these measures cannot rewrite the harsh math of a shrinking river in a warming climate. And so the question hangs over the desert like a storm cloud that never breaks. What happens when there is nothing left to draw? Because when the straw finally reaches the bottom, the lights won't go out immediately. There won't be a warning siren. The strip will still dazzle. But behind the scenes, the systems that sustain life, the water we take for granted, the delicate balance of human civilization in the desert, it will all be under threat. This story is far from over. Lake Mead is falling. Snow is thinning. Agreements are expiring. And across the West, cities are watching the numbers, hoping innovation and human will can outpace the river. But how long can they? And when the next crisis comes, the one that no tunnel can fix, will we finally see that the most dangerous thing about living in the desert isn't the heat, or the scarcity, or even the river itself? It's our confidence that someone else will always hold the straw.